politicized and very unfair, right? As I have told you, within European Commission, that directly affects their governmental model, how European Central Bank decides everything, right? We think most representation are from very strong countries like Germany or France, right? They have interest to make policies favorable to their own nation because they are there for them to represent their own interests, right? They don't care about weak states because they already overrule these kind of minor states, and plus newly joined nations because they haven't been in Eurozone so far. They've only been 2 to 3 years, right? So they don't really have incentives to cater all their necessities. The fundamental reason why EU was established is to build economic alliances and have more economic flourishing within European continent, right? They don't want to interfere with political arena because the reason, under the name of democracy, they don't care about different political issues. They don't care about. It's just that they don't interfere with domestic political arena because they respect diverse form of political system, right? This is what binds these European Union together by sharing the similar culture of Roman Empire, by having these kind of democratic spirits within them, right? Because more even if European Union will even be more politicized when under their model, and this will be proven by my second speaker, because there will be less room for new actors to intervene. Therefore, we are very proud to oppose. Thank you.
I thank Nalina for position for her remarks, and I would like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case. Please deliver the speech within 30 minutes here.
Ladies and gentlemen, before everything else, let's just get what Eurozone is right? So countries come into Eurozone not because they want to share the same culture. If that is the case, then currency will be irrelevant, right? Our same culture is already shared by the European Union. The reason why they have the same currency is because they want to build a strong economy together, realizing that in context of globalization, cooperation is necessary because influences will be made regardless of whether you have control over them or not. The basic assumption of side opposition was this, that if countries remain their sovereignty, they can control everything within their own country. But we told you that in the context of globalization, and especially in the context of Eurozone, where they share the same currency, full control of your own currency is not possible. And without a policy, what would happen is two scenarios. Either one, it is dominated by stronger powers such as Germany through the use of financial aid, through, say, austerity measures, stuff like that, or that is not controlled by anyone, thus leading to disastrous consequences that no one could anticipate. I'll prove to you why this trade-off of our policy is necessary in my extension. But before that, 3 points of refutation. One, the basic case was this, that we need government legitimacy. We just told you that their assumption was that government legitimacy is actually necessary, right? But secondly, we asked the question, so their concern was that people perceive the government as unfair and perceive their governments as useless, right? So the question is, what should you do? Because without this policy, people already feel that in a status quo. Because they feel the loss of control. Because they feel like no matter you're in Germany or Austria or Greece, no matter what you do, the currency cannot be controlled by your own government. And that is where the sense of lack of legitimacy comes from. But secondly, we say the second thing of lack of legitimacy is because they feel like that the entire Eurozone is dominated by certain countries. In this case, Germany. And we told you that ECB is a better agency because one, it shares a more fair representation, and secondly, because it is at least more marginally neutral. But lastly, we say what is going to happen is that you also have to consider the willingness of other countries as well. Because what you are doing right now is that different countries have to help out each other, right? So Germany has to help out Italy, France has to help out Greece, etc., etc. The question is, how do you get that willingness to start with? So under their model, we don't see how people in Germany will actually be willing to help people in Greece, knowing that they are not going to follow what they're going to say and knowing that they're going to screw up anyways. So in order to trade off between that willingness and the perceptions of these people, we believe this policy is necessary. Secondly, on the argument about currency, right? We think it is extremely naive for side opposition to assume that currency is no different from any kinds of measurement for two reasons. One, because currency actually reflects your economy. So when your economy is is strong, usually currency goes up. When economy is weak, usually currency goes down. That is why China's currency goes up and up, even if China tries to clamp it down, right? But the question is, in the context of European zone, the question is some economies are stronger and some economies are weaker, thus in both sides influencing the currency in itself. And that is why we need a macro planning in order to mediate these influences. But secondly, they also ignore the fact that there are certain important implications of your currency. Because if the currency is too costly, it implies that your export will be very costly as well, and people will be less likely to buy your products. Just like when I'm traveling in Japan, I feel like that everything is a lot more expensive than in my own city. So that is why currency is important, because it means less export if it's expensive, and if it's too devalued in the case of inflation, people don't trust your currency anymore. People don't want to invest in the economy, and thus means less investment, and your companies also screw up. That is why most countries try to gain the mediation stance in the status quo right now. And that is why in the case of Hong Kong, we actually peg our currency with the USD in order to try to get away superinflation or the other way around. So, because of these ignorances, we don't see how the case stands to start with. But the last attack was this, that ECB is not a right agency, ignoring what James already told you, right? He told you a few things. One, that it does have a fair representation from all central banks from these countries, right? So it is at least better than Germany trying to coerce other countries through diplomatic means in this case. But secondly, we told you that these people are not politicians. These people are bureaucrats or technicians who are being elected or appointed to these banks by a non-renewable term for 8 years without any political pressure from their own country. And that is why they are better able to make independent decisions regardless of how people in their country think. Therefore, we believe that what they have to prove to us no control or the control of certain powerful countries is actually better than the control of ECB as a more neutral agency. Before I go to my argument, yes,
the ways in which the state decreased corporate tax to invite MNC, for example, is going to be undermined in your policy. How is going to be having a reasonable expectation for the small country, for example, regain the economy on your paradigm?
Can you just repeat the first half?
The ways in which the state decreased corporate tax to invite multinational corporation, for example, is going to be undermined our policy.
I don't see why it is not the case when our first speaker told you that it is specialized and catered to each and every economy. If the country is able to appeal to say that it is going to help our economy and thus help the currency and the mediation is possible, we don't see why ECB would not allow that to start with. What we are arguing over here is not what kind of policy is good in the end, but what should be the decision-making agency here for these policies in the end. So opposition, please encounter that to start with. Now, why is there a necessary trade-off? As I just told you, the current paradigm right now is that there is either no control at all or a control by Germany or control by other powerful countries. Why? Because they control them by offering financial aid to these countries when they desperately need it, right? So Germany was telling, say, Greece that if you don't implement austerity measures, we will not give you financial aid and you will be seriously screwed up. And that is why the people in Greece felt that resentment. And that is why people in Germany don't feel the need to help them unless they comply. But right now, what we're doing is providing a neutral agency, a third party, to say that yes, Greece should do this, Germany should do this. Because we also recognize the fact that the responsibility is not only in Greece, but in Germany as well, where they aggressively push up the currency and benefits from the worst of economies in order to boost up their own exports, right? So we see all these countries actually does have the responsibility to bear this. So, question here in today's debate is, who actually determines the trade-off? We believe that it's better for the ECB to determine the trade-off. We recognize and concede the fact that some economies will be hampered to a certain extent because of this trade-off. Germany may suffer a bit less export because of a cheaper currency, while even though they gain a bit more exports, say in the case of Greece and Italy, they may have to have less government spending precisely because of the austerity measures. So opposition challenged us by saying that we didn't define fiscal policy. We told you exactly, we define it as government spending and budget because it is the basis of budget, which leads to austerity measures, which leads to exchange rates, and all the things that they also talk about on side opposition. On their side, they really haven't said anything at all. All they said is government legitimacy, assuming that it is possible. We told you that government control over these things are impossible without a central planning agency. Very proud to propose. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his remarks, and I would like to call upon the Deputy Leader position to continue the case. Please deliver the speech within 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I would like to talk about one substantive in this debate. I would like to talk about how this motion is going to damage the economy of Greece, because there's a huge difference in terms of the economic power of the Greece and Germany, and how this weakening of the weaker countries is going to destroy the economy of Eurozone as a whole. But before moving on, a couple of rebuttals against the government bench. So government bench came up in here, talked about with a very blurred definition, because they clearly didn't clarify what kind of policy they were talking about here today. Tax rate, fixing the tax rates and fixing exchange rates are totally different stories in this particular case. The motion clearly states it's about fiscal policy, which with regards to the government spending, which is different from its fixing exchange rate, totally different from the currency rates issue, right? But even if we take their model, which is about fixing the currency rates or so forth, we still think this is going to hugely damage the country which are in a weaker position. Why is that? Because we think that the exchange rate is something that deeply influences the amount of exports and amount of imports that you actually do. For countries like Greece, countries like Spain, which have an extremely weak industry, for them to be stronger in export, they have to have a lower exchange rate so that they can compete against other sorts of countries, right? If, for example, this policy is going to be taken, what's going to happen is that these weaker countries are also going to be imposed much higher exchange rates, and I would like to talk about why it's going to be happen later, which is going to further damage the exports, the amount of money that they can collect. Therefore, we think their model doesn't stand in either case scenario. And second of all, they refuted my partner's point by saying how ECB, the European Central Bank, is an extremely fair actor because they have different sorts of representatives. Well, really, does that actually happen? We think that the policy that are taken by ECB is likely to be extremely unfair against weaker countries for two reasons. Firstly, because where does this money of European Central Bank actually coming from? It's mostly coming from the stronger countries like Germany or France, who are the ones who are most of the donators of the money, right? And the people who donate the money who used to be the strong decision maker who have a stronger say in these kind of economy. Even fair representatives are coming from different sorts of countries. If the stronger ones, if we cannot please the stronger people, we cannot gain the money, right? In that kind of cases, we think that weaker countries are always be defeated in this procedure of negotiation. This is unlikely to happen. And secondly, the reason why they're trying to have a uniform measure in terms of Eurozone is because they said Greece or Spain are such a weak country, so bad at managing exchange rate and so forth. If that's the reason, because we have seen this failure of Greece, we have seen the failure of Spain, there are much trust towards the technocrats or politicians or people coming from Greece and from Greece and Spain, right? So we think that there's no incentive for these German, for example, technocrats, German specialists to listen to what the Greek people actually say, right? So we think that the unfair decision is much more likely to happen, like my partner clearly explained to you. And certainly they talked about how, okay, technocrats or specialists deciding upon these issues are much better than politicians, because politicians are much more short-term seekers. We think we doubt this point, because we think that we already told you, because taxation or collecting money is about depriving someone's property, which is something, that act that needs the strongest legitimacy. If you imagine the mindset of the citizens being deprived their own money, being deprived being decided the amount of money that you deprive, but someone who actually don't know is rather less legitimate, and they feel more distrust or antipathy compared to our party, in which politicians, at least someone you chose to from different sorts of person, deciding to what extent you're going to deprive the property of your own. In that kind of cases, we think our party has much more legitimacy. And why is this so much important? Because we think that in order for the government to actually collect money, in order for the Eurozone, ECB, to collect money from someone, you need to make it feasible, right? But the problem that happened in Greece was because that people didn't have trust towards what the government, people didn't have the trust to these people who are engaging with collection of money. They didn't have the will to actually pay. A lot of people try to avoid themselves from paying taxation. In that kind of cases, we think an actor who has much more legitimacy is the one who has to decide to what extent they're going to deprive the money. At least we think our party can better achieve that legitimacy to make this the tax collection much more feasible. Yes.
Yes. Even if what you say is true that Germany is going to dominate the central bank, isn't that already happening in the status quo under your paradigm, when Germany can coerce these countries into their policies by using fiscal aid?
Okay, if you oppose that coercion, why this motion is going to further extend the coercion, please prove to how that coercion can be improved by this particular motion, because they can dictate everything, right? And okay, so moving on to our own substantive about how this is going to deprive the opportunity of the Eurozone to overcome the economic crisis that they have been faced so far. So the reason why Greece and Spain and these weak countries has actually economically failed, their budget failed, because it was because they failed to actually establish a strong industry in their own country, because the industry, right? In order, even no matter how much bailout they do, even if they do not have the strong industry strong enough to collect a lot of money, they cannot regain the economic power. But we think their policy is going to damage their power to actually regain or establish a strong economy. Why is that? Because as I said, because this motion is likely to lead to a policy that is too much in favor of countries like Germany, we think that, for example, corporate tax that is imposed upon Greek or Spain is much more likely to be higher, right? Because Germany recognized that if we let, for example, Greek or Spain to have a low corporate tax, your own corporation is going to run away from Germany to Greece, which is going to be a loss for